All righty. It looks like we're live on Her First Million. Welcome to Her First Million, a new YouTube channel tailored exclusively for women business owners in traditionally male-dominated spaces. I'm Amanda Bedell, your business chaos sorter and host for today. With Her First Million, we're dedicated to providing 3 segments that transform your business trajectory. What we're looking at in those 3 segments are: first is love your numbers. We're here to unravel the complexities of financial management, where we'll demystify the numbers so you can confidently optimize your business to greater profitability. Then in the second segment, what I do is called Ask Amanda. Your questions take center stage there, where no question is off limits. Whether you slide into my DMs for privacy or share your inquiries in the comments below, I'm thrilled to hear from you and share insightful answers that can help you steer your business in the right direction. And the segment that I am most excited about, you are here with it right now. I sit down with entrepreneurs that have excelled in industries traditionally dominated by men. In these interviews, we unearth strategies and navigate through challenges to uncover the well-kept secrets that have led to exceptional women to get to that coveted first million and beyond. And today, right here and right now, we're live and we're about to have one of those conversations with none other than Jen Coken. Here is her story, and it's set to inspire. It's set to transform, and we're here to help share what it could be like for you to reach that 1 million in revenue. So without further ado, let's dive into the heart of Her First Million and welcome our guest, Jen. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome, Amanda. It's Jen Coken, just so you know. It's like the
Coken. Thank you.
drink.
I should have asked you that.
That's okay. I always say it's like the drink or the drug. I don't judge with an N on the end. I'm not judging.
Coken. Thank you,
You're
Coken.
welcome.
Jen Coken.
Yeah.
Here we are with you live. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today.
I'm
Could you
so
tell us a
excited.
little bit about you and what got you to what you do?
Absolutely. So I coach women in male dominated industries. I'm an executive leadership coach, and I'm always working with women to achieve 3 things: greater authority, influence, and impact. On the authority side, it really is about authoring your own journey, because that root word of authority is author. So what does it mean for us to, march to the beat of our own drummer, to embrace some of the traditional feminine characteristics of collaboration, interdependence, truly caring about the people that we work with? I'm not saying men don't, but if you just look at kind of the traditional male female paradigms, and I came up through this, which is where you're authoritarian, you are directive, you are making, can I swear on this? Making shit
Probably not.
happen. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? When I say lead with authority, it's not authoritarian, but it is authoring that journey. So many times, females who work in traditionally male dominated industries, whether we have our own business or working with another company, we kind of feel like we've got to like whittle away at parts of us to fit in. Enough of that shit. We don't need to do that at all. So that's the authority piece. The influence is, how do I inspire the people around me? How do I empower them? How do I increase collaboration and communication? And the final piece is something I think everybody should be thinking about, no matter whether you're in a male identified or female identified body, which is, what's my impact on the world? How am I going to leave the world a better place than when I came into it? And that's about identifying, unleashing, and living your legacy.
I really like those 3 pillars: authority, influence, and impact. How did you get there, Jen?
Whoa. So I was in politics for a long time. I worked 25 years-ish in grassroots politics, everything from working on good government issues to the environment to getting people elected at the state, local, and national level. Founded a number of nonprofits, profit organizations, but each and every time along the way, I was one of the few women in leadership. I was one of the few women in the room who was taking on the lead on things. And when at the same time I was doing that, I was also coaching for a big personal growth and development company, big international personal growth and development company. And somewhere around 2016, 2 things happened. One was, and it wasn't somewhere around, it was 2016. I was laid off of my job, had built the municipal lobbying arm of a company to get them more business. And we realized, which I'd been nudging them on forever, that we had to do the profit and loss by office and not company wide. And had we done that by
Mm.
office, the pricing quotes we were giving to the municipalities would have been entirely different.
Mm.
However, when they did it across the company, they realized they were losing money and had to cut my team in half and let me go. Okay. Yeah, I actually stayed to lay off the rest of my team because I looked at my boss and I said, I got to do it. And he said, no problem, because that was the kind of relationship I had to the company. And when that happened, my first book came out the next day, called When I Die, Take My Panties, which is a memoir about my relationship with my mom, who told me before she died to take her panties. If anyone's ever worn hanky pankies, most comfortable thong underwear in the world. So then I'll just leave you with that right now. Anywho,
The conversations we have on Her First Million is about panties. I love it.
Yeah. So when that came out, when my book came out, I thought, oh, maybe it was a bigger moment for me. It was the fourth job been laid off of in the number of years I'd been writing the book. And I thought there's got to be a bigger something, right? So I started thinking what I was going to do was write full time and educate women about ovarian cancer. And I did it very well. The book got to a bestseller status on Amazon. I was on radio, TV, and I was exhausted and I hadn't made a dime. Because even though something can be our passion project, we got to figure out how to monetize it. And when you're an author and you are out there, unless you're very, very well known, there's not a lot of money in it. And one of my coaches said to me, you got to start making money. Well, duh. Thank you, Steve. But it made me go back to my roots, something I was very passionate about, which was coaching. And so I sent an email out to my list, landed my first client. Now, fast forward another 3 years. There's a lot of bro marketing out there. There's a lot of marketing that's like, you got to do it this way. And high pressure, high ticket sales, selling to pain points, which I cannot stand, instead of finding the right fit clients for us. And so it felt like I was trying to whittle away myself to make myself fit in with the construct that was already out there, rather than trusting my gut and my own authorship of my journey to identify the women that I wanted, or the people that I wanted to work with through a series of, coaches, because coaches are amazing. I was able to finalize who I really wanted to serve, which were women like me, women who felt like when they walked into a room, why are there no other female voices here? How do we create more space for female voices? How do we both honor the men that are there, but not adopt the behaviors that are not conducive to promoting collaboration and team and empowerment and all those kinds of things? So that's where I squarely landed. And one of the things I'm most known for is helping people make imposter syndrome their superpower. Because so many coaches, there's a lot of tips out there. In fact, there's a million more tips today than there were even 2 years ago. None of the tips work because it all comes down to neuroscience and your brain's having an amygdala hijack. So how do we identify and disrupt that brain pattern? And I find it incredibly fulfilling because I think because of women's nature of caring and caretaking, we sometimes don't focus that on ourselves. And that's something that I am a huge fan of, which is, you gotta feed the fountain over here before you feed somebody else. But I also think that seeing women recognize, oh, I don't have to, it's helping them find their authority in dealing with their board or dealing with vendors or dealing with potential clients. I get to say what goes. I don't have to listen to anybody else. Because when we are anchored in who we are, when we're authoring our own journey, it's like we have a taproot sunk into the earth, and doesn't matter what's happening around us. We're kind of reevaluating it based on who we are. And I think we lose that because our sight is always on caretaking others, whether it's parents or, all of us have been, it's like in our DNA, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I like it, when you alluded to honoring the men in the room. When her first million and what I do, what you do, isn't about male bashing. It's very easy to say male dominated spaces, traditionally male dominated spaces, so that you know who you're talking to and that person can see each other in what your marketing language might be. But this isn't about like, oh, poor me, I'm the only woman in the room. It's wow, I'm the only woman in the room. That means that I get to champion the way and bring others with me. So that's one of the things that I love to say to my clients is um, in the way that the entire world seems to be set up here, at least in the US, there are things that work. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need
Right.
to start over.
Right.
But what pieces of what works work for us? And then tapping into just what you just said is like my intuition or those where I tend to go into collaboration versus, competing and, bringing people into that space.
Yeah,
I
I'm so on board with you, and you made me think of something. I'm actually reading Katie Couric's autobiography, Going There, for my book club, which is tomorrow night.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah.
I was sort of resistant at first because I'm not usually one who wants to read an autobiography about somebody famous. But I have to say, something she said a lot of things about paving the way for women. That's where her mind has often been, no matter what the jobs were that she took on. But some things she said as I was driving back to from Philly yesterday, listening to it on tape. And she said, my commitment has always been about how do I lead the way for other women, but I forgot about this woman and making sure
Mm,
that I was taken care of. So I think it's a good thing for us when we're sitting in those rooms to look at how do I open doors for others, but we've got to take care of ourselves first and foremost before we have our eyes on taking care of anybody else.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, if you are one of those people that's sitting at the boardroom being the only female, how can you create that change? Even, yes, taking care of yourself, but how can you be the catalyst for change and bring others into that room with you? I think that's one of the things that I like to, just point out and make sure that we're we're working towards getting more voices in the room, and it doesn't matter based off of, race or skin color. It's getting those diverse voices in those rooms that will make us stronger and more resilient companies in the future.
Yeah,
Pretty.
and I had a real lifetime experience or a real-time experience with that when I headed up an organization called the Western Clean Energy Campaign. My job was to stop 37 proposed coal-fired power plants from being built in the interior West. We did it. Before I started there, yeah, it was amazing. And I did a lot of work with indigenous groups from the Navajo Nation, and I often would look around the rooms because, indigenous culture is a matriarchal culture. It's passed down through through the grandmothers. I
Mhm.
said, how come there's no indigenous voices when a lot of our funding goes to them? And I made sure there was a seat on the board, but I also made sure that I was the one asking the tough questions in a room. And I'll never forget, I was with a group of funders and we were having a conversation about what indigenous grassroots groups needed and how could we provide it for them. And I was quiet taking it all in because I'm looking around the room. I'm like, okay, we're all white, pretty much. Mostly men. There's some women here, but there's not one indigenous person in the room. And
Mhm.
they finally came to me and said, Jen, you're being really quiet. And I said, well, this is what I'm thinking. We're talking about helping indigenous people, but I don't see anyone here who is indigenous. So how can we profess to know what they need if we're not asking the source? And there was drop silence and someone's like, so we're ready for lunch. But they did come up to me. They're like, you were right. And to their credit, they then made room and figured that out. So I think it's, how do you make space for others? You've got to be the one standing up, requesting that space. Because if we leave it up to those that have not had a traditional seat at the table, it's putting
Mhm.
too much pressure on them. And we've got to be good allies and speak up about this as well.
Mhm. That's a really good point, and I think I carry a lot of that on my shoulders when I think of lens of inclusion. So I do Clifton Strengths, and one of my Clifton Strengths is inclusion, and I see it's not necessarily different people in the room, but it's different voices in the room. And luckily, you had someone at the table that said, "Hey, Jen, you're not contributing. What is it that's not making you contribute?" So when we're at the table and we're sitting there with our self-doubt talk, like my heart kind of does this like little weird like double step if I want to say something that I know is going to be super uncomfortable. I know that I'm going to kind of make myself really vulnerable and show up in a way that it's not just that I'm speaking up for me, but that I'm going to speak up for somebody else. It seems like that imposter syndrome slash self doubt. How do you coach people around that?
Oh, that's such a good one. It's well, first of all, understand that anytime you stretch yourself, you're going to feel nervous about that. That's that heart palpitations, like the feelings are real. That's why I always say it's not imposter syndrome because a syndrome is a medical diagnosis. It's
Hmm.
imposter phenomenon. So
Yeah.
it's phenomenological, it's as lived. And the moment that you have that experience of the butterflies in your stomach or your palms sweating or your heart palpitations, I think like you, I'm thinking to myself, "Ooh, this is gonna be a good one when I share it, and I know I need to say this right now, otherwise I wouldn't feel this way.
Hmm.
I'm about to take a risk."
Yeah.
Recognizing that's where we grow and learn is when we're willing to take those risks. Also recognize just the brain doing its thing. The brain's job is to keep the thing it's a brain of alive, which is you and me. And it used to be physical threats, now it's psychological threats, but the
Mhm.
brain still relates to it like a saber-toothed tiger is coming toward us. So I think being able to be present, take some deep breaths, kind of dial out and just witness, notice, meaning what I mean by witness is notice what are the thoughts I'm having right now as I want to speak. Oh gosh, is what I'm going to say going to sound am I going to sound stupid? Are people going to think less of me? Notice the heart palpitations, the physical sensations. Notice any tension you have in your body because sometimes when that rears its ugly head, we may be clenching our legs or our stomach or our
Mhm.
fists or our sphincter, as I like to say. Your you know what?
Mhm.
So just noticing that and just noticing that you're present. When you're present, you get to choose. Am I going to choose to speak from fear or am I going to choose to speak from I've got something to contribute? I'm a contribution and I want to speak up. But I think what's key there, that actionable step, is to kind of stop the action and go, wait a minute. This is just my body's way of responding to some perceived threat. Okay.
Mhm.
What are the thoughts? What are the body sensations? What are the emotions I'm having right now? Okay, good. And I've got gray hair. What else?
Mhm.
Really just dealing with the facts and then speaking up anyway. And that's
Mhm.
courage, right? Doing it anyway, even though you feel fearful.
And I think it takes practice.
God.
I and as you were talking, I went into this very specific situation that happened with me. I was in the only woman in this space, and um, all of a sudden, somebody said something about my appearance, and I went into kind of a tunnel vision feeling during the rest of that meeting. I wasn't able to participate at all. I went into like I couldn't hear anything else. I felt small and diluted into just what I looked like. And I was not able to speak up in that moment. As I've gotten in more and more comfortable and in those spaces, I have been able to find my voice in the moment. But that in specific inches, it happened like I think a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now. Um, I had to wait until the next time that meeting came up, and I did end up speaking out. I asked to speak at the end of the meeting. A lot of the people that were in the meeting the week before were there, they were present. And I wrote down how I felt. And I actually called out a few other people in the room and said, um, this is when you saw me disengage, no one noticed. Um, and this is how it felt for me. But also what I heard was when someone read the recording or watched the recording later, it was a female woman of color. And she was like, just that because you spoke out, it made me feel like I had more power in that room the next time to speak up. So that's kind of a segue for you into what are the actual strategies that we can implement when we're dealing with these gender related challenges or biases in our industry, or when we're in the moment.
Yeah.
What are some strategies that I can do to be faster at that processing piece? Because I did lose some people in that, even though it took me some processing time to come back with what I wanted to say. How can I get faster at that? What are some strategies that you do?
Yeah. The first pin I want to put in what you said is it's a lifetime of practice. That's number one. I think that's incredibly important. Mastery is about practice. Mastery is not you wind up somewhere. The great masters of art were constantly practicing their brush strokes, the way they held their paint brushes. And that's the very same thing you want to do with imposter syndrome. Number two, I've got a course on Udemy that I highly, highly recommend anybody watch, because what I would say to you is that moment that happened, and this is the pre-work to get the time between action and reaction. The action being somebody commented about your appearance. I'm going to throat punch that person because that's an HR flag right there. I'm throwing the HR flag. Nobody gets to comment on your appearance. That's unacceptable. So first of all, that action, we want to get the lag time between action and reaction, because some people would have been like, screw you, I'm out of here. But you froze, right? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So you froze. I would have been the fawning one, like, trying to make it better for everybody. So I would ask you to sit down with that moment, taking yourself back into that moment, which is what I do in my Udemy course, and just ask yourself, what's an earlier similar moment? What's an earlier similar moment? What's an earlier similar moment? Because what I have found to a T is that when we are wound up about something like that happens, it's definitely a brain pattern that was established when we were kids. Sometime between the ages of 8 and 12 is what I found. So you keep asking yourself to go back to the very, very first time you experienced somebody commenting on your appearance and you freezing. That's probably what I would look for. But the memory may not even be connected. That's okay. The key is, in that moment, what was threatened? Well, it's the you that's in the body, that's you, but the brain is trying to protect you. So it said to you, don't say anything. Kind of like a baby fawn, right? When they're off by themselves, they sort of just freeze. And then can we look to see, well, what did you decide in that moment when we get back to that earlier similar pattern, so that we can see? Because when that happens, when we identify that defining moment, there's also a construct you put in place to protect yourself. Or I say the brain put in place to protect you, to ensure that experience doesn't happen again, but it keeps happening. Why? Because now you have a brain pattern and the brain's predicting. That's all the brain does, is take in information and compare it to what's already there. So we want to be able to see that, identify the brain pattern, uncollapse it, deconstruct it, look to see what the win has been for you from that, because there has been. That's why you're still here. That way, when you have that same experience in the future, you can know, oh, right, this is a brain pattern. Again, witnessing it, witnessing the thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and being able to go to that person who said something private and having a private conversation and say, look, this did not work. Or being able to speak up in the meeting and say, you know what? I don't appreciate the comment about my appearance. I am more than my appearance. And here's what I have to say about that. And kind of, you have to, it's almost, I'm from the Midwest originally. And so we're
Me too.
Oh, where are you from?
Minnesota.
Okay. Ohio.
Ohio. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Right. So back in the day, people used to say, how are you? Fine, 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 fine.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I had to force myself to say how I really was. And I remember, and this was from one of my coaches, remember the first time doing it. Do you remember those toothpaste keys we used to have that would help, like it would get all the toothpaste out of the tube? It was like something, right? You fit the end of the toothpaste through and then you wound the key as you went through. I felt like that was on my neck. Like, I'm not doing so good today. Like, blah. So I think the other strategy is figuring out a way to speak up, but allowing yourself to fail, because sometimes it may come out not great. And then you're self-aware enough, you go clean that up. But I think it is the practice of speaking up in the moment. It's the practice. It's the practice. It's the practice.
Yeah. And I heard I heard a few things there. First, I heard, this is more pre-work. I heard pattern, so identify the pattern and then deconstruct what that was for you, and then how can it be a win, and shift that in the moment, when you're doing so. Then when it is happening, you're able to speak up if you have to. I also want to call out that, in the instance that I shared, I decided for a public call out in the moment, because I knew that the person who did it was strong enough to handle that. He's my coach, so he's my my advisor, my business advisor. And I knew he'd want it, but it was brought up in a public setting,
Yes.
and it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I felt like it needed to be addressed in a
Understood.
public
I
setting.
love that.
So it was, and it wasn't negative. It was actually like a very lovely. It just like made me. It was about being young, and just uh,
But it's still, you
looking
got
young, but
triggered.
I'm not young. So it's like, but
Right.
yeah, it made me this big instead of a business person. It made me feel like this. But yeah,
Well,
so
let me
those
say
are
one
some of the
thing.
things.
It didn't
Mhm.
make you feel any way. The brain patterns
The
got
brain.
triggered that
Mhm.
led to that experience, right? Because he just said what he
Mhm.
said, if we just looked at facts and
Right.
fiction. But I think what's key is also sometimes it's okay to take time for ourselves. It's okay not to respond in that moment.
Mhm.
But I also hear your commitment to have the power and the voice to be able to, and the tools to be able to in that moment. I think you definitely have to do the pre-work. And then it's
Mhm.
also noticing, okay, wow, I got triggered. What was that about? Because it's not going to take long to figure out the early or similar. I mean, do you know? Do you know if there was an
Um,
early or similar incident?
there's a lot to unpack there with our with our audience of those in trades. They're on the field. They're working in male spaces that could very well be life threatening in
Mm,
some places. On job sites, construction workers, electricians, people who go into people's homes. Like, what are some tools that they can take? Is it intuition? How would you kind of lead them through being leaders in their space in that kind of capacity?
I think I'd start to ask myself, where am I not the author of my own journey today?
Mm.
Where am I not authoring my own? It's about agency too. Do you feel like you have agency to step up? Do you feel like you have agency to say the hard thing? Um, so I think that's probably where I would begin.
Hmm.
And then when you reflect on your day and you look to see, okay, was there any place where I wasn't trusting myself? Was there any place where I didn't speak up when I felt I wanted to? Okay, well, what's that about? Because we
Hmm.
could blame, circumstances, situation. It's great. That just doesn't give us any power. Just like you
Hmm.
sat down and you thought it through for yourself, you gave yourself power, and you also gave yourself power to speak out at that meeting in a public
Hmm.
setting. That's very important too. And so I think that's what's key.
Hmm. That's a really great. I wrote that down. The agency piece, and sometimes we go into spaces knowing that we're minorities, but trusting, self trust. I really see that. Could we shift a little bit towards motive, or like our team too? And
Yeah.
what steps do you think we should take to build that and motivate our team in this way? From as far as
The
being.
authority, influence, and
Mhm.
impact piece. Yeah, it
Yeah.
always starts with authority and authoring your own journey, because I think once you're confident in who you are, it's much easier to ask to be curious, and I think that's what's important around influence. Are you curious about your team? Are you curious? Because we can make a lot of assumptions that so and so said X in that meeting and they're just out for me, or this person isn't getting back to me. You could tend to take it personally.
Mhm.
So I think getting curious, I'm curious what took you so long in getting back to me. Well, you didn't tell me by when. I don't know. Could be something as simple as that. I think it's also getting really interested in your employees, interested in the people on your team. Are you doing regular one-on-one meetings where you're asking them what's working? What isn't working as well as you'd like it to? And what have you done to try to solve it? Because I think sometimes we err on the side of wanting to get things done and wanting to be a good leader by giving answers rather than letting people fall and fail. And it's okay as long as it's not business threatening, or life threatening. Allowing someone else to fall or fail, I think, is a good thing. And then it's interesting because one of my clients just said this to me. He's like, well, what does empowerment mean? I go, that's a really good question. I think it can be different for every person. So asking people on your team, the people around you, what would empower you in this moment? What could I do differently that would leave you feeling empowered? And I think the final thing is this business of inspiration. How do you breathe life into others? How do I leave them feeling bigger than they did before they talked with me? So I think it's coming to things from letting go of taking things personally, coming to things from curiosity, engaging with the people on your team and asking them what they need versus making an assumption. I think there's a lot of assumptions that have been kind of bred into companies and bred into the way we do business that, what empowers you may not empower me, right? And then the final thing is, how do I breathe life into this person, leaving them feeling bigger? So it's curiosity, empowerment, and inspiration.
That's really good. I always coach folks in with their teams to set up win-win situations. So it's like one of those things that once someone has a job where their basic needs are covered, and that means they've got a roof over their heads, they can afford food, they can stay alive, right? So if they're in scarcity and in crisis and they don't have those things, we're talking about another story. But little red arrow, we are here. They've got their life set up. They've got enough money to live. They want different things, and those things evolve around growth, like feeling as though they're worth something, and they're a part of something that's bigger, but then also that they're heard. And so those weekly meetings are so important. I'm so surprised when I go into businesses and they don't have weekly touch bases. They don't need to be that long. They can be very action oriented, and some people don't want to do the touchy feely. And I just say, when you're we're speaking to entrepreneurs, so women who own their businesses, and a lot of us just get like, let's get this done. And we've got these people. I hire these people for a specific job. Why aren't they doing it? And when we elevate ourselves to a business owner, so business owner mindset is around investing. So we're investing, but we're our conductor. We're a conductor of the business, and we're creating jobs. We don't have a job. We need to create jobs. It's about the who, not the how. And when we have that who, what we need to be doing is moving obstacles out of their way. So if you're not speaking to them about what their obstacles are and letting people have the opportunity to be, I'm sorry to drop the word, vulnerable, because we hear a lot in, coaching spaces, but in male dominated industries like the trades and construction, we don't hear it as much. But vulnerability with your team and letting them have a space to air that, but not, like you said, don't take it personally. It has nothing to do with you.
Has nothing. You have no idea what's going on in the background of their life either.
And you'll always have the target on your head, but that's why you need coaches because you need to be airing your stuff to somebody that can actually help elevate you versus worrying about what the person that you hired to do the job is thinking about you. So don't take that home to your husband or
partner, whoever,
at all either. So.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were talking about. Reminded me of something that happened last week, which was a good reminder that as business owners, we've got to be self-cleaning ovens. We don't have it all dialed in, be willing to work on ourselves at all times. I was really having a tough time with 3 people on my team because it just seemed like I wasn't getting what I wanted. And I could blame and point fingers until one of my coaches said to me, well, you could blame and point fingers, but why don't you take the case that you're not communicating your expectations in the way that they can hear them so they're successful? And I went, Okay, good. And that's how I started the call. And I also, the original call that I did, I was very, I said two things to them. I said, number one, you're absolutely the right team. I have no doubt about that. You're the right team on here. Number two, I will, because of my tendency in the past to please people, sometimes I withhold feedback and it can come out in a torrent. And that is what is about to happen. So I'm apologizing in advance. But they're like, what in the F are you effing doing with F and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, do not take any of the F bombs personally. It's just me expressing myself right now. But we had a really good, productive meeting. Everybody got on the same page. And I circled back with everyone and said, you doing okay? Oh, yeah, you were clear. We're the right team. So I didn't have a fear of being fired. We just had to get better about what was it we needed. And somebody on the team said, you know what? This is all coming about because I didn't do my job. And I need to do X in order to have Y. I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. So I think it's also being a self-cleaning oven. We've got to always be looking, not like we're to blame or at fault. I mean, if somebody sucks on your team, get rid of them. But always got to look at, I love that. Am I communicating in a way? Am I communicating my expectations in a way that you can hear them so you can be successful? And I think that speaks to what you were talking about of how do I have my eye on the success of the team versus
How do we make them win?
How do we make them win? Yeah. Yep.
They need the roadmap to how their job can meet your expectations. A lot of times, as entrepreneurs and starting these companies, or even when we've been in business for 3 to 5 years, that's when we're starting to hire more people. And we just hope that they, pop them in a job and hope that they know what they're doing. So it's all about those expectations and meeting them and having the system in place so that they can win.
Yes.
I'm going to move on to our last couple of questions, or my signature questions for her first million here. And that is, what essential knowledge or insights should our listeners be aware today to reach their first million in revenue based off of, leading with confidence in male dominated spaces, in your opinion?
I think what's most important is you got to figure out what's going to work for you. You do not have to adhere to the cookie cutter approach to business building. If group programs don't work, don't do it. If one-on-one doesn't work, don't do it. If whatever you're doing with your particular company, if the agency model doesn't work for you, don't do it. And how do we know if it works or not? Look in your heart. What feels good? What feels right in your body? Your body keeps the score. Your body will tell you what's working and what isn't. So number one, go your own way. I was thinking of the Stevie Nicks, right? You can go your own way, go your own way. Really, really important. I think that's a number one. And I think all too often as entrepreneurs, especially when we're in the first 5 years, because I know this was me, I was, I was like looking out there for what was everybody else doing and how do I do it like them? And my word for this year is trust, because where I have come to is trust myself and my own knowing of the way that I want to work in my business. I don't want to be working 24/7. I don't want to be hustle and grind. I take either all of Friday off or from 2:00 on Fridays to give myself some space. Otherwise, we're going to be working 24/7. So I think that's the number one thing I would say.
Oh yeah, that's a really good one. As we build our businesses to 1 million and beyond, it feels as though we need to work harder. And I am 100% behind you in that, working smarter and giving ourselves space. It's amazing what happens even when you go on vacation or let your brain sit and not be in work for a few days. That just happened to me. These last 4 days, I just took it away. I didn't even do my daily email, which I usually do. And I had big epiphany moments. So there you go. 1 million can get faster when you think about those things. And then the last question that I have is around recommending any valuable resources, such as books or workshops that have influenced your entrepreneurial journey to help these folks reach their $1 million goals.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to name some books that are oldies but goodies. One is The Big Leap by Hendricks, which looks at what you're passionate about versus what you can do, what you're committed to doing, and not what you're committed to doing, what you're designed to do. I'm not saying his words the right way, but he's been around like 25 years. That was an incredibly helpful book. The Four Agreements, was an incredibly helpful book around not taking it personally and not making assumptions. And then I would
Mm.
say the other course I would recommend to anybody, which is something that I did actually the first time when I was 15 and the second time when I was 32, is the Landmark Forum. And it's a company, landmarkworldwide.com. I used to lead their programs, but that one weekend course will completely transform your mindset and get out of the way any firmly held roadblocks that are in your way. I think there's lots of other longer paths to get there, but I highly recommend the Landmark Forum to anybody. And no, I do not get a toaster anytime somebody registers. I just took courses from them for a long time, and it's made a huge difference for me.
I absolutely love that. I did something similar to Landmark. It was called it is called Momentum Education. It's on the East Coast mostly, but they were in Seattle for a little while. That was a game changer. I would agree. And some people tend to think that Landmark has a connotation around, maybe it's like a cult or something. I think that people can feel like it's icky. There is a recruiting aspect to it at some point. But you don't have to do that.
Take the nuggets. Exactly.
Yeah,
Do the weekend and take the nuggets.
Yeah, I mean, it was game changing for me. It just looking at myself from the lens of other people. The exercises are just amazing. If I could do it again, I definitely would. Usually you can't repeat them because the exercises are the same, but it's really great. And the other book that I just based off of curiosity, that curiosity piece that you had earlier in the interview, is The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. I feel like that's just a very baseline book that everyone needs, especially if you're a business owner, you need to read around being curious rather than, taking things personally, and the assumption piece. That's so good. I'll go ahead and look up all of these books. I wrote them all down and put them into the description for folks. And then Jen, could you give us, could people reach out to you? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. One is I've got a great quiz on imposter syndrome. If you're interested in taking that, it's jencokenquiz.com. It's a redirect to another site that's like really long and hard for me to remember. So give it a minute before it redirects. Once you take that quiz, it'll give you some insight, some clues to your defining moment. But then the follow-up email, you get access to my course on Udemy for free. So that's one way to get in touch with me, and the option to do a call with me if you want to unpack your insights. But they can go to jencoken.com, JenCoken.com, or email me at jen@jencoken.com, and then all the socials except I don't do X/Twitter/ whatever the hell it's called. So
whatever
Instagram,
it's called now.
Facebook, LinkedIn. My preferred way is to connect on LinkedIn.
I love that. Okay, great. Well, I'll make sure to get that link in the description as well. And this is really, really fun. This is one of the things, this is a cornerstone of what Her First Million is all about, is getting those voices, all of our voices in the room. Thank you so much, Jen, for your insights there and that leadership piece and how we get outside of our own way when it comes to imposter syndrome and self-care too. I feel a lot of that. I'll have links in the resource area or to all these resources in the video description. And remember to subscribe and hit that notification button to stay in the loop on the next Her First Million episode. So we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much. Take care.